Well, Michael Gross, been watching a lot of the Carbon Dating series that you've produced online. And the great news for us, we're an awards website, is for the first time ever, these short form series are going to be competing at the Emmy Awards later this summer. So how exciting was that news for you when you got that?
Well, pretty exciting. There's a whole new world out there, a world that did not exist in 1982 when I began Family Ties. Remember, there was no such thing as the internet, and there were only 3 channels on television: ABC, CBS, and NBC. So lots is changing, lots is exciting. I'm thrilled with Carbon Dating. It was my first foray into a web series, and the idea attracted me from the beginning. The fact that because let me just explain, back up a little bit, because there are so many more platforms out there now in which to produce content, it doesn't necessarily mean the content is better. There's still, now there are hundreds of places to put content, but as usual, only 95% of it is not worth watching. Okay, I mean, that's just the way I feel. Actors are always chasing interesting new material, and I, to this day, probably turn down more than I accept, just because the answer is not good enough, or been there, done that, or whatever it is. This was new and interesting. The whole idea of people in the second half of their life, or even the last third of their life, trying to find love, attachment. How do they go about it after divorce, disillusion, death? How do you re-enter that game when in a youth-oriented culture? So Carbon Dating, I thought, was an absolutely brilliant title and a wonderful concept. And I don't know, maybe the golden girls of this new century. But there's a whole audience out there, people who are looking to connect in ways like this. Who I talked to a friend of mine, a high school friend of mine, recently, and I said, I forget what embarrassing question I asked her at a reunion, but she had recently lost her husband. And I talked to her about dating and marriage and things like this. And she lost her husband about 4 years ago. And I said, might you get married? And she said, I don't know about that. I said, might you date? Are you interested in love? And she said, my God, yes, I'm not dead yet. And so that's something that's attractive to all of us at any age. There's a thrill, there's an excitement about being in love and falling in love. For some, it's almost an addiction. And but I think particularly after you've had good relationships, and let's say long-term relationships, when that ends, you still have a hankering for a good relationship. I wouldn't, let's say if something happened to my spouse, I've been married, let's say known my wife for about 35 years. We've been married for 32 of those. I wouldn't rush out to marry just anyone, but I love being in a committed relationship. And I think I'd be interested in that again. Not right away, not overnight, but when you've perfected the skills necessary, and there are a set of skills necessary for a long-term relationship, it's hard to just say, oh, I'm going to retire from long-term relationships. So I think this is an interesting time for a show like Carbon Dating.
Well, 2 things I like about it beyond what you were already talking about. One is there's just a massive amount of people that are from the baby boom generation that are now in their 50s and 60s.
Right.
And this is not just romantic relationships. I mean, your 2 main ladies, it's also about friendships at that age. Right.
And, science is beginning to tell us more and more that one of the keys to longevity is great social relationships, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's lovers, but having a social life, And so these two ladies are close to each other. They need each other. They fulfill things in each other that they can't have without each other. And so I think it's a healthy and a very beneficial relationship.
Well, you mentioned earlier this is your first time producing, which surprised me. But I got to thinking about, you know, your Family Ties producer, Gary David Goldberg, who we lost a couple of years ago.
One of the best.
Did his activities, the way that he worked on the set, the way that he put things together, did all of those enter your mind as you were producing this? The lessons you learned from him, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, there was a time. What I like most about this is helping to shape a story. Now, and to do a little bit of direction on set. I love actors. I love working with actors. I was asked many, many years ago when doing Family Ties, would I like to direct some episodes? I demurred at the time. I said no. I'm not sure why. I think I was comfortable with where I was. I was afraid if I started directing, maybe I wouldn't have that much to do in the series itself because I'd be behind the camera instead of the front of the camera. But I've always loved working with actors, and so in this in Carbon Dating, I hope to do a lot more of that. Be behind the camera, just get the best performances possible out of all the talent that's out there, because there's some terrifically talented actors in this town, and who will be attracted to even smaller platforms like this if the material is wonderful. And we hope to give them more of that.
Well, that's something I've hated. I mean, it's been the case for 100 years, but when actor or an actress gets past a certain age, the level of material just starts to drop off. The opportunities aren't there nearly as much.
I'm fortunate in that there are some ongoing things like the Tremors franchise that have afforded me, even at my age, to be an action hero. Bruce Willis is still at it, Schwarzenegger to a degree. So yes, we can get old and still be active. I guess we are the epitome of active seniors. If you're fighting monsters or aliens or bad guys, and you're into your 60s. There are possibilities, but time and again, like Amanda Sarah in Carbon Dating, our executive producer and writer, creator, you have to make the material. There are opportunities, but sometimes you have to take the bull by the horn and create some for yourself. Because yes, this is not a town that values age and wisdom, but I think there's a lot to be said because it is a huge demographic, as you say, out there waiting, who've turned away from television, who simply say, the media has nothing for me. But I think there's something for youth as well too, because nobody likes watching old people make asses of themselves as much as youth does. So we may also attract that audience, because you make the same mistakes at any age that you did as an adolescent. You may fall in love again, and they say love is lovelier the second time around, perhaps, but it ain't easier. You still feel like a teenager.
That's right. Well, I like the fact that you compared it to Golden Girls, because I get that feel from it of the comedy, but also the pathos and the emotions of all of that. It's really well done. And for people that haven't seen it, I mean, we're not talking about a 30-minute show here. We're talking about 5, 6, 7-minute episodes, right?
Right, exactly. Easily digestible. Yes.
And available on your YouTube account as well as on carbondating.com.
That's exactly right. I think these short segments work particularly well for the web. And if you look at a lot of long form things like the wonderful Downton Abbey, Downton Abbey had very short scenes. They cut in and they cut out. And I don't know if that is a sop to people's attention spans these days, or whether it's simply good work. But I thought Downton Abbey is a great example of a long form piece having very short internal scenes, cutting in and out and keeping all these characters alive at one time.
I want to ask you a couple of career questions. I was a huge Family Ties fan. And in fact, I texted my brother right before you and I were about to chat, because he and I would always talk about that, throughout the 80s and even with the reruns. And we were both convinced that you were the glue that held that ensemble together. You were so good in that role.
Well, that's quite a compliment. Sometimes it was a difficult role to fulfill because, like the character, because I had to be sober. Like the Tom Bosley role in the Cunningham family and Fonzie, the kids had all the adventures. And at the end, Marion Ross and Tom Bosley had to be there to kind of settle things down and make sure the world hadn't fall apart when the kids were being crazy. I had to fulfill that same role to an extent in Family Ties. But I was constantly champing at the bit because I wanted to have those adventures the way I am allowed to do in, let's say, something like Tremors. Or I wanted to goof off and play. And so in some ways it was difficult for me. I felt like I was always held back a little bit, playing the role of the sober father. One of the great things about that is the writers were so good that they frequently allowed me not to be sober, to be a little silly at times, which I loved. I was not the traditional father. I had a few of my own adventures and silliness, and he was they made him a little OCD, which was wonderful and fun. When he was recycling, he would recycle everything in the house. When he had a new hobby, or whether it was model trains or magic, he took it to a crazy, incredible degree. And he was obsessive. And I loved that trait in him because it allowed me to be very silly, very funny, and probably a lot like myself, actually.
They learned from you as they were writing those scripts.
Yes, and it was wonderful. Those guys were the best, and I'm still in touch with some of them. As a matter of fact, with Meredith Baxter as well. We will soon be sharing a birthday together. In this month, June. So she's a doll, and as a matter of fact, I just spoke to her on the phone yesterday. And Michael Fox, I try to see him when I'm in New York City. He's on the East Coast, 3,000 miles away from me, so I don't see him as often.
Yeah, I remember that back even before we had things like IMDb, that you and she not only have the same birthday, but the same birth date.
Yes, exactly. The same day, same year. So let's just say we understand each other. We've been through a lot of the same chapters together in our lives, and we're still close. As a matter of fact, last year we did a film for Lifetime Television called Becoming Santa.
I remember that, yeah.
A great Christmas holiday film. And so for weeks we're together in Canada, playing at the North Pole. And we just had a grand time. She's bright, she's funny, we're very close, and she's a great lady. I was fortunate to have met her all those years ago and met the whole team from Family Ties. One of the reasons I would say that in some ways it's been a hard act to follow, I have a love-hate relationship with permanent work. I have a love-hate relationship with full-time work. I seldom say to people, if I wanted full-time work, I would have done something else for a living. So I love the variety of freelancing, of doing Bert from time to time, revisiting him. Yes, that's the same character, but I'm not playing it constantly. One time I'm Santa, or I'm a perpetrator on Law and Order SVU, or a crazy guy in this situation, that situation. And I love the variety. I was basically a theater actor trained for the repertory theater. And LA is in a funny way a large repertory theater where if you can play a variety of roles, it can be a fascinating career. I never thought of myself as a leading man, always a character actor, the guy who'd be coming in a various number of roles, doing a variety of things, and by and large, that's what my career has become. And I don't know, maybe I'm just in addition to the OCD, maybe I have attention deficit disorder, but I love variety.
When Family Ties first started airing, obviously you all behind the scenes knew what you were producing and performing, but once the episode started, at what point did you all realize, hey, this is not only really good, but it's taking off with the audience?
To be quite honest with you, it took a couple years. Those were the days when you only had a few networks, where aside from only having a few networks, you had a few network executives who were interested in creating quality and nurturing something. I don't know, like buying a racehorse that has come from a good lineage, has all the potential, but you take time to train that horse. You put it through its paces. And those were the days when there was a brilliant young programming director, I forget, he might have the head of NBC, Brandon Tartikoff, who
one of the best ever.
One of the best ever. And I constantly go back to Brandon. He was brilliant. He was funny. He had a heart, and he had patience. He trusted Gary David Goldberg, trusted the concept, and let us sit for almost 2 years with numbers. It wasn't really, they moved us around from place to place. Gary was fit to be tied at some time. They were looking for the right place for us in the schedule. And it wasn't really until that wonderful Thursday night, the must-see Thursdays, that must-see TV, where there was Cosby, and then us, and then I think Night Court and Cheers and all this stuff right in a row, and you went, oh my gosh, we owned Thursday night for the longest time. And we had been a critical hit, but audiences really didn't find us in a huge way until they were beginning to find us. They were beginning to find Michael Fox. That's when we knew we were cooking with something, because even before the Back to the Future days, there was something very affable about him that was appealing to preteens. And so I knew something was going on when the bags of mail were coming in for all of us, but I mean truckloads for Michael. There were preteens out there who found him extraordinary. They loved the character. They loved Michael's portrayal of the character. And that's when we knew we had a lightning in a bottle, so to speak. So that was even before Back to the Future had begun. This teen idol thing was huge. We had seen it with Happy Days, and my friend and fellow Yale School of Drama graduate Henry Winkler, not to mention Ron Howard and the rest of them. We saw it with Scott Baio. We had seen it. There was Joni Loves Chachi, Laverne and Shirley, all these sorts of things that were still on the same lot as Paramount when we began Family Ties, along with memorable series like Taxi. But so we had seen that teen phenomenon happen, and that began with Michael. Only grew with Back to the Future and those other things, but that's when we knew we might have some staying power, because apart from the critical reviews, we needed an audience. We needed numbers. We needed backsides on sofas when our show was on. And that's when we began to get some reassurance that it was gonna go. It was gonna happen. It was gonna stay around for a while.
Well, it's definitely stayed around for a while. I'm still watching it most weeknights, one of the channels. I don't know that you realized that kind of stay around power was going to be there.
No, nobody thinks they're going to be nobody thinks they're going to be a legend. Nobody thinks it's going to be that well written that people will care long afterwards. You're just out there doing your job, and in some ways, to be quite honest with you, I think I took it for granted back in its day. I had been a theater baby, hadn't been watching a lot of television for many years. Prior to Family Ties, for years during prime time, I was on a stage somewhere doing live theater, so I wasn't even aware of a lot of what was on television and how Family Ties stood out from the pack. I took it for granted. I don't anymore.
One last question. I've noticed, I guess, twice that I recall on TV at least, you all gotten back together, the NBC anniversary about a decade ago, and the TV Land Awards not too long ago. What's it like when you all gather together? What do you do? What does everybody act like?
It's always a pleasure. Unlike some, we've stayed close. We don't see each other as much as we'd like. Tina Yothers and Justine Bateman, among other things, are very busy mothers of children of their own right now. And not only that, but Justine is just graduating from UCLA with a degree in computer science, computer production. She's so bright, I don't know what she's doing, you know. She was the Carl Sagan of our cast. She was always bright. Never had a chance to finish her educations because she was so busy as a young actress. But she's doing it now because she was that thirsty for it. Tina's great. Has a couple of kids. Is very busy being a soccer mom as much as anything. Michael, of course, is by and large in New York City, and you've seen him on The Good Wife for years, and is that right? Yeah, The Good Wife, and other things. You'll continue to see him, as well as his great advocacy for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research.
Yeah, he has done remarkable things with what some people would have just folded up and said, you know, I'm going to go home. He took that and made really a separate career out of helping people.
Absolutely. That's just the kind of person he is, and will be to the end of his days. He's a good guy. He comes from good stock.
Well, good stock fictionally from you and Meredith, as well as his own parents and family, I'm sure. And listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed watching Carbon Dating this week online, and I hope a lot of the Academy members will as well. And try to get Michael Gross his first Emmy nomination. I can't believe you were never nominated before.
Well, I don't know. You know, I've been very fortunate to do some great work and have my share of accolades, but not many awards. For me, always, I mean, everybody likes them. And I'll tell you the reason they especially like them, because it's very good. It's good for your career. I think it means more to actors in terms of getting better material than it does being patted on the back. We love being patted on the back. We love being told we're good, and particularly that our peers feel we're good. But the work itself is the reason I got into this. And so the work is the cake. Awards are icing on the cake. If we can get that icing, all well and good. But the real nourishment comes from the work itself.
Well, thank you so much, and I do hope we get to see you over on the red carpet for the Emmys later this summer. And even
to God's ears. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I hope you have the same.